This was a vintage heavy metal tray or server of some kind that had no base in it that my husband picked up at a thrift store and brought it home, and so he cut out a wooden base to put in it. And I decided I kind of wanted to give it an old world look, so I mixed Deco Art Americana Lamp Black with Folk Art Metallic Antique Copper and Folk Art Metal or Metallic Royal Gold and Americana Multi-Surface Metallic in the color Chocolate. And I just began adding all over the tray, which was already kind of almost a rusty gray color. But I wanted to start out with this so that then I could go back and add some color to the grapes and to the leaves before I decoupaged the top of it. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just applying the paint. The underneath the legs are actually metal leaves, so I also wanted to paint them. After I finished the video, I did go back and flip the piece over and paint underneath in that same dark color, just because I always like finishing my products so that, you know, if someone turned them upside down, it would at least look like it kind of matched together. So then I put a coat of Waverly white chalk paint on top of the wood, which I later learned or discovered really wasn't necessary because the decoupage paper I used had a black background. So it probably would have been fine to have just left it a natural color or paint it black. Normally when I decoupage, I do want to have a white background underneath the decoupage paper just to make the colors pop. So I took my little handy dandy heat tool and tried to dry it off pretty well, still painting around the sides, and I realized I wasn't in view very well. Sorry about that. But I wanted to at least get a good coat on the top and the legs before I began adding additional color to it. I had a little bit of difficult time figuring out exactly what colors to use for my green for the leaves and the purple for the grapes. I started out dry brushing on Hauser Green Medium, which is a folk art paint, and I tried to just barely touch the leaves and the trim with that Hauser Green Medium. However, with the dark color under it, it really wasn't showing up as well as I wanted it to. But I did get one coat sort of dry brushed on and realized that perhaps my black wasn't totally dry yet, and so some of that was also mixing with that green paint. Then, after I took my fingers and rubbed some in and used my paper towel, I decided to tackle the grapes on either end where the handles are. And I don't remember the color that I used. Perhaps it was Dioxazine Purple by Folk Art. I'm not sure. But again, going on that dark base, the purple really didn't show very well. So here I'm going back, and I actually found a green metallic paint in my stash, and so I began dry brushing over what I had already painted green just to give it a little bit more of a color pop. I didn't want a lot of color because, again, this is, to me, an old world vibe on this tray. But I did want the green to stand out a little bit, so I used that green metallic and my fingers and went all the way around, just trying to give it a little more of a pop to the color, including on the feet of the tray. And then I really decided that maybe I needed to add a little gold rubbing buff. And so I put some rubbing buff on my finger and tried to just hit high spots. When I went over that purple, however, there was such a contrast between the high spots of the grapes and the low spots that I still wasn't fully pleased with it. When I use rubbing buff, I usually squirt a bit out on my plate and get a little bit on my finger and then rub it off on a paper towel or somewhere else on my plate where I can pull from it again, because I don't want it to be very strong when I first put it on. Here I'm taking a small brush, dipping it in the rubbing buff so that I can get down in the cracks and crevices a little bit better, and also to accentuate the veins on the leaves. So then I decided perhaps I needed to mix some Waverly White with my purple to make them a little bit lighter. Well, as you can see, I did that, but then it was way too much of a contrast. So I thought the grapes and I were going to have a big time wrestling match on these colors and how I could finally get them to where I want them, which I did do eventually. So now I'm getting ready to apply the tissue paper, which I got from Zazzle, and it's called French Cafe Conversations Gold Words and Tissue Paper. And it came with 2 very large sheets. It's not as thin as regular tissue paper. It's got a little bit of a sheen to it. And I applied it with my favorite decoupage medium, which is Debbie's Design Diary DIY Liquid Patina, which I get from Vintage Retail Therapy. You'll see that I've got a plastic bag over my hand because I have found when putting decoupage paper down, if you will work in sections and try to smooth it down with a plastic bag over your hand, it helps to get the wrinkles out. That's especially true if you're working with napkins. Now this is where the real struggle came in. I should have decoupaged the piece of wood before my husband attached it to the base. There was not enough room for me to get my little gator sander in there, so I used a emery board, but even that wasn't really strong enough to cut it. I used scissors, I used a sharp box cutter. Fortunately, I never hurt myself, but I tell you, that was a real struggle that I will not make that same mistake again. I did eventually get most of it off, but in so doing, I pulled a little bit of the paper up on the edges. No worries, I just took my same dark color of paint that I already had on my plate and kind of went back over it a little bit so no one would ever know. That part did take me a while. And then I put another coat of the liquid patina around the edges and over the top, just to make sure that everything was laying down very well before I ended up going back and putting a sealer over the entire piece. I really like this paper. This piece won't be used for serving food. It will mostly just be a decorative piece. It's really even too heavy to hang on the wall, but it would look nice on a coffee table with perhaps an arrangement in the center of it. You could even do some kind of a little setup, vintage kind of setup on it. Maybe put an old antique book on it. So as you can see, that was quite the process and quite the struggle. And then I took my paintbrush and went back into my dark color. I know it's out of view so you can't see, but I went back over the purple and then the gold on top of the grapes with a little bit of the black, and I also touched up some of the green to give it a little more oomph. So it would bring out the gold in the print, but also make it just have a little bit of pizzazz. Once I got all of that painted and I was satisfied with it, I put a coat, a clear coat on top and on the feet of a mixture that I put in a bottle, a condiment bottle of triple thick and Duraclear. 3 parts triple thick to 1 part Duraclear. So you can remember that, the ratio, because triple is 3. So 3 parts triple thick to 1 part Duraclear. That just seals everything in. And I also put it on the metal part because I felt like it would really bring out the colors in the metal and give it a nice finish. Took a little bit more of my sander, sanded a little bit down on the grapes, and then covered them again with some black. And that just helped to soften that really stark gold. And as I mentioned earlier, once I got the whole top part of it done to my satisfaction and dried, I flipped the whole piece upside down off camera and used that same old world dark combination to finish out the bottom. So I was very pleased with it once it was all said and done. I appreciate you coming by today and watching this video. I hope you'll leave me some comments, how you like it. Throw me some little emojis. I would really appreciate that. And I'll see you soon.